and welcome to this YouTube channel. Right next to me I have the great guitarist-composer Janko Raseta, and I am Olli-Pekka Määttä. Janko, thank you very much for giving this opportunity to meet you live here in Munich.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's the pleasure is all ours and all mine. Just to give a little bit of background information to our listeners, this interview is a part of our project for the European Cultural Capital Year of Chemnitz in 2025. The project is about bringing two different guitar ensembles from two different cultural capitals together, who are going to play a concert together in Chemnitz. And as a part of the concert, as the biggest part, as the highlight of the concert, we will be also premiering a work by Janko Raseta called Winds. So, Janko, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Janko, I'm a musician. I play guitar, I write music. I like to experiment a lot. I like to try things out. And I find lots of joy in it.
That's awesome. And would you please tell us, where did you grow up and how did that affect who you became?
Well, I grew up in Poland. I went to school in Poland. I learned my first things about music in Poland as well. How did it impact me? Well, I would say it's very important where you grow up, also when. But Poland is a very special place for musicians to learn their crafts, because it's a different, maybe you could say, learning system than you have in Germany. Some people say it's the remnant of the communism era, where the ways of teaching were different, and you can see it. And some people criticize it, but I believe, well, you have a very, very big guitar scene in Poland. That was for many years. It still is like this. So I think that it was, for me, very beneficial to start there and to be able to listen to other many great musicians which were around me. So my first steps in Poland would of course shape many things that I do right now, even though I changed many things about how I see music since then. Many things changed. I see music in different ways. But Poland, what a beautiful country, and what a beautiful musical scene, especially because we only have classical musicians which excel, but also jazz scene, which is very big for many years as well, and also composition is of very high regard, with many festivals like Warsaw Autumn, one of the most important modern contemporary music festivals in the world. So a very big musical scene, and many great memories that I have from Poland.
That's very interesting and nice to hear. What caught my attention immediately was you mentioned there is a difference between German and Polish music education. Of course, coming from Finland, I also know this or tend to compare. How would you describe the differences between German and Polish?
Well, I believe we privately talked about that a couple of times. So, of course, it's a difficult topic because it's not easy to put it together in the words so briefly. It's a huge topic, but I would say that maybe the Polish system is more serious. Maybe the students are expected to be more serious in what they do. It's not a bad way if you're not serious. It's not a bad way if you're more playful in the ways of teaching and of learning. But this is certainly a difference that I observe. So that would be the biggest contrast that hits you when you compare.
That makes sense. And you have also in Poland, probably you have like obligatory theory subjects and music history and this kind of, So in that sense, it's also similar to Finland, actually. We have the same, but at the same time, I believe the Finnish education regarding this is quite relaxed. Like there's not so much pressure, there's not so much competition, but these subjects like theory are obligatory. So it kind of gives you a really nice base for doing music as your either hobby or professionally. Yeah, so sure, to German that's quite a big difference actually, where everything is free and you can choose it.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so then I just wanted to congratulate you again. You were chosen as a composer for our project in the European Cultural Capital
I'm very
year
grateful
of
for
Chemnitz.
this. I'm very grateful for this. So thank you for allowing my music to be heard.
We are very grateful that you are open to compose for us, so it's really a privilege for us to be able to premiere your composition. I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about that, and have you been to Chemnitz? I mean, Janko just mentioned it, that he has been to Chemnitz, but just briefly.
Very briefly, and it was some time ago, so I don't have a very good recollection of the place, and therefore even more I'm looking forward to seeing the place and to meeting all the people.
Nice. That's great to hear. And how do you feel about composing for the cultural capital year of Europe?
Of course, it's a big honor, and I'm very privileged and very happy that I'm able to do this. And also musically, it's very challenging. Many different reasons. For example, it's a composition for guitar ensemble, which is well, you'd be surprised how many ensembles there are, but in the end, it's not a common instrumentation. Even for a guitar player, maybe it's not usual to think about music written for multiple guitars playing at the same time. We do it in pop music, we do it in rock music, so that we would, for example, overdub. We would record many guitars at the same time. We know compositions for guitar and tape, for example, the Steve Reich's electric counterpoint and so on. But to actually have so many guitars playing at the same time, it's extremely exciting. It's so nice. It's so unusual, and so to have the room for this kind of exploration, because I'm a guitar player myself, so to take something which is so close to me and to my heart, and then basically multiply it. Right? This is what happens when you try to write for a guitar ensemble. And then of course, as always, as a composer, you have the moments where you're very excited because you have an idea about how it's going to sound, but you're not really sure. And until you really hear it, it's always going to be a mystery. So this is where I am right now, and I'm in the excited phase when I'm awaiting a birth of something beautiful. And this is what I'm waiting for. This is going to be amazing.
That's great to hear, especially the part where you're still excited. Let's hope you're not going to be too disappointed by the time you get to hear our first rehearsal. But I'm also very happy that you're going to come to Chemnitz a few days prior to the premiere, so you get to listen to us and how it sounds, played by around 30 guitars approximately. Yes. And you kind of mentioned already, you talked us through a little bit through composing and composing especially for guitar and guitar ensemble, and that's actually what I wanted to ask you about next. Yeah. It was I wanted to ask you about, of course, in general, composing for guitar and guitar ensembles. Which kind of methods, or how is your method for composing guitar?
Well, the method changes, of course, and the method is different for every composition. But I would say that in general, for me, it's changed for good. I used to write on the computer. So some people would ask, how do you write music? Do you play piano? Do you sing to yourself? What do you do? For me, for many years, it was literally writing music on computer. So in the music engraving software, I would just experiment. I would write the notes on the staff, and that was my way. Now I changed because I found that it's actually faster for me to conceive ideas when I just record them. So I would basically pre-produce the composition and then write it down.
I see.
Maybe it's because I'm experimenting with electronics, with equipment, with many toys, but I found it very easy to use my native input interface, which is the guitar, to use the guitar and to try to create different sounds with the guitar. For example, if I would write for a different instrumentation, if it was an orchestra, I would try to imitate orchestral sounds on the guitar. I see. And it works very well. It's surprising how close you can get nowadays to actual orchestral sounds, for example. Now, I would not do anything else when writing for guitar. I would also let myself be inspired by different sounds, which are not guitar. Okay. And then try to adapt it to arrange it for the given instrumentation, like for example guitar ensemble.
Okay. Wow, that's really amazing to hear, and especially when you go through all or this kind of development or change in the style, and I kind of got this impression that it's almost like now maybe more not only experimental but also more in the direction of going in the direction of improvisation initially perhaps, and then it takes its form, and then you continue composing.
I think so, but I think it's always a bit like this when a composer comes up with an idea where. What is improvisation in the end? I mean, you can ask yourself, you can improvise in your head, and you could say that if you're composing, it's basically improvising, but in a different time frame. Maybe it's not directly bound to your mechanics when you play, but it's creating music regardless. So you use the tools that you have. Maybe you know something about music, maybe you heard some music, and then you put it all together, and this brings us to a new musical expression. So I think improvisation is definitely a good way to write music, yes.
Yeah, makes sense. And actually it's also part that kind of tends to get neglected sometimes in the musical education, so it's always an interesting thing to notice with pupils how they begin developing their artistic side when you try to involve some improvisation in the education and the lessons.
It's very important, yes.
Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you as well about your current composition for us called Winds in 3 movements. Could you tell, or could you walk us through this composition? Mm-hmm. What could you tell us about it?
So Winds. I usually name the pieces in the end when they're already written, but I think this time the idea of some kind of flow was there from the beginning, and you have a couple of motives which are being developed, which you can hear, so you get acquainted with a couple of sounds, and those sounds will stay for the whole length of the composition with you, and some things happens to those motives, to those themes. So it's supposed to be playful, you know. I hope it gets through that way. It's supposed to be some kind of a game. It's not supposed to be funny per se. It's not supposed to be serious, because it is meant to maybe resemble nature in a couple of ways. And you know, nature is not good or bad. It's just things that happen, you know, and. So you can't really like blame something, you know, that happens in the nature, because it happens without a particular reason. And I think that was my inspiration for this composition. Now, of course, I needed reasons for things to happen in the music, but I tried to make it maybe feel as effortless as possible for the listener. Now, for the musicians, it's a different story. It's a big challenge for a composer to write a composition which is supposed to be easy to play.
Yeah.
But then in the end, it's always going to be some kind of a challenge where you know you have to really get acquainted with the composition. I know that you guys have so much time to prepare, and I'm actually very grateful for it, because you get to know the music for a longer time. I myself often take part of projects where you maybe have 2 or 3 days to prepare. You get the score and you have to play it, and sometimes I enjoy it first when it's already done and it's recorded, and it's many days after we played it I first begin to understand.
I see.
And this way, I think, so the music, I think everyone should interpret for himself. But I hope that this playfulness, maybe also slightly cinematic kind of sound, gets through, and I hope you're going to enjoy it.
We are definitely going to do our best to be able to manifest all of that. What I got really curious about is how you mentioned that it's always a kind of a sacrifice about what should be playable, but what sounds good. Did you have to make a lot of sacrifices while composing this piece?
Well, composing is sacrificing.
Okay.
Always. So on a technical level, maybe yes. It's I don't think that the piece lost anything through through the challenge of being technically in a technical way easy to play. I think it shaped the piece. I think it's what gives it structure. But also on very, I mean, I don't know if musicians are going to be listening to what we're saying, but I mean, I find it very, very exciting that maybe even fingerings, maybe the geometry of the instrument is also dictating how the piece should be written, and would push you in a certain direction, even in the melodic way or maybe harmonic way. You know, what kind of harmonies can you use so that you don't go too crazy? And you come up with very interesting sounds that I would never come up with. You know, I would, if I was, you know, writing a composition for myself, I would probably not care about those things, and would never explore the sounds that you can hear in a composition winds. So you have 3 movements, 3 winds. Maybe in a kind of classical form where you have fast slow and fast sequence, but it's, of course, it's not a sonata, it's not a symphony, so it's kind of free in form, and you can, maybe it's even a bit of variations. Maybe it's even evolutionary if you want, so that you can again hear the motives going and changing through the piece. And you can hear them in many ways. You can hear them faster, you can hear them slower, then you can hear them in a mixture of slow and fast. You know, the different rhythms. You have some polyrhythms, you have some also like bitonality at times. So I think it comes quite well together, and it's a nice, playful piece, kind of relaxing, you know, for the listener. If you listen to it, I hope it's going to be like this.
Yeah, we are going to be sweating, I'm sure on the stage. But yeah, it's I just want to tell this. Oftentimes I have this feeling that, or at least one of the things I put a lot of focus on in the music which I listen or play, is how the composer uses his own thematic material and which kind of development happens there. And that's one of the striking things about Wind. I really liked the way you use certain motifs between movements and in which context. And that's one of the things that initially appealed to me very much. And you did a very good job.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very
much. Enjoyed it so much. Yeah, but yeah. Would you like to say something more about that?
Well, I enjoyed writing it very much as well. I mean, it's always a journey, you know, that it's always a combination of many things that you experience and you put it in the music, and maybe some events, maybe just the time you spend even not doing it becomes crucial in the end about what is going to end up in the piece, you know. So maybe you just take a walk in the park and you don't actively work on a composition, but in the end it kind of happens in the background, and you realize that just afterwards that maybe there's some things you wanted to say but you didn't know how, and it just comes together in your subconscious, possibly, I don't know.
Yeah, so the mind is working on it, even though you're not writing it actively in that moment. Sure. Yeah, makes sense. What are some misconceptions people have about composing and about being a musician?
Well, you have to ask the other people, possibly. Well, many people would probably downplay how specialized we are nowadays. Even though we try to be very versatile, even though we try to do many things, very often I get asked if I sing. Very often I get asked if I dance, which I unfortunately don't. You know, but many people would identify this as being a musician as well, and I think it's a beautiful notion. You know, if obviously it's coming from the pop culture, because you have musicians who sing, who dance. Well, I must say I don't do it. I focus mostly on playing and writing music. But other than that, I would say that most of the things that I hear about, you know, how people see musicians, are mostly true. I think the vision of a musician in the modern world is kind of accurate among non-musicians.
Yeah. How would you describe it? Are musicians seen still like as lazy people who are sleeping very long and then working only in the evenings, or is it something like you will be very poor while making music as your living? I mean, you can answer that of course in a second. But what I wanted to also say is that you mentioned versatility. And this is definitely something that kind of gets thrown at your face, especially after the university and after the studies. Yes. The field has become so versatile. Yes. And I'm sure it's possible to still be able to be just really good at one thing, but it tends to be this, that you are also producing music, you might be composing, you are performing, and probably teaching as well. Yes. So there's a really big field of things that you have to do as a musician, and you can do as a musician. So
you have to, yes, so many things, and this also changes very quickly, very rapidly. Yeah. I remember that even when I was studying a couple of years ago, right, we used to study together. That wasn't that long time ago, and I believe since then also many things changed. So for example, I didn't know how to produce music, I didn't know how to record music. Now I do it very often. On one hand to basically save money, but on the other hand to have possibly bigger artistic freedom, because I get to decide about many things that otherwise would be impossible. You know, it's not about the fact that other people are bad at what they do, because of course it's beautiful when you have a dedicated team of specialists, but on the other hand, sometimes you can get to a very maybe of course difficult situation, because you have to do so much, but it's a different mind space where you really get to decide about many things yourself, and the results are also different. So this is especially true when composing music, because this is a very private thing to do. You just do it by yourself, and you create the music, and then it gets performed, so it gets shown to people. But also when you record yourself, for example, I'm sure you do it yourself as well. Yes. That it's different when you for example, work in a studio, and when there are other people working with you, there is a different time frame. There is a different kind of pressure. There is a different kind of interaction. So I think both of those worlds can coexist very beautifully, and it's great to do it. But it wasn't really that apparent. For example, no one taught us during our studies or at school, you know, how to record music. But also, as well, nobody taught us how to do our taxes. Nobody taught us how to maybe book concerts and stuff like that. So this is also something that all musicians have to do, but kind of remains behind the scenes, and it's something that takes probably most time. This is something that takes much more time than creating music itself.
Yeah,
to prepare yourself. So the notion of a musician being lazy and sleeping in and stuff like that, while it might be true because of late working hours, it's also just a part of what we can really see, and there's so much more going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's a really good answer to that. I think I saw some kind of a meme on Instagram where it was like, the meme was about, I didn't want to go to a 9-to-5 job, so I decided to become a musician, and now I work 24/7. So there is a lot of that.
Absolutely,
it's a lot of hard work.
It never stops.
Yes. And you are self-taught with producing music, or did you have some kind of?
I mean, my father is a sound engineer, so I had a help in the beginning, you know, to get into the scene. However, he works mostly with live sound.
Okay.
And I kind of went the other way. Since I was already writing music, I thought maybe it would make sense to possibly try and bring it to the end to have a ready product, which also involves mixing and mastering and all those obscure processes that happen before the music becomes what we know as a recording or a composition. And this is basically the experience that you collect during many hours of doing it yourself, because I'm not really sure that there is an organized way to learn this through the perspective of classical music. I don't really think that. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe there's a place to learn it. Maybe there's a university which teaches specifically producing music in classical and modern classical direction. But most people that I know working in the field are just musicians themselves who expanded their experience.
You mentioned our studies together, and I remember you during the studies in Weimar that you always seemed very mature already. Like you possessed a great ability to play already, and I was thinking, like, what were you thinking during those times while you were studying? Were you thinking, oh, I want to do only guitar as my profession, or were you already thinking about, okay, I also want to expand to this direction and this direction, or how was it for you during those times during the studies?
I don't think that changed that much during the years. I think I'm still trying to learn a lot, and I hope it's never going to stop, because this is the the biggest adventure that I can envision, that I can hope for, to learn new stuff, to experiment. And this was also the case back then. Of course, I was studying classical guitar, and I was focused on it very much. I was doing basically just classical guitar, but I was curious. I always wanted to do some other stuff. I was composing music, of course, at the time, and I think that this is the probably very important thing for a musician as well, to be able to have the freedom to experiment and to allow yourself a bit of uncertainty and a bit of risk, because you know, in other fields something like this would be probably inconceivable, you know, because this applies to the ways you earn money and to the ways how you guide your life. But if you try to remain free, and if you try to keep your mind open, as empty as it sounds, it's very important. And what I mean is to surprise yourself and to maybe push yourself in directions that you never did before. I can't remember now specifically what I was doing during my studies in Weimar, but I was always happy to try many things. For example, I was living close to a building of the university where I was up there, Haus am Horn,
yes.
And there were jazz students there, and I was very curious because I didn't know anything about that. I would listen to jazz, I would never play jazz. And
okay.
I still wouldn't call myself a jazz musician, but I enjoy very much experimenting in that way too. So I would go up there, and I was like, can we maybe exchange our knowledge? I'm going to show you something on classical guitar, and you guys show me how to operate, you know, the electric guitar, how to sing in the jazz way. So I would do those things, and always surprise yourself with different stuff. For example, now on Monday I'll be joining a electronic music ensemble performing improvised set on modular synthesizers and stuff like that.
Okay.
I'm going to play guitar, but try to not make it sound like a guitar because I'm not sure they really know that I'm coming with a guitar. They hope I'm going to bring a synthesizer that I want. So.
Oh, okay. So you went to carry the guitar.
So we'll see what happens. But this is what I'm talking about. So just to keep yourself inspired and maybe do things that you don't really know how to do is something that keeps me going and keeps me excited.
That sounds really amazing. One of the things I often see with students is that they tend to have this need to be able to see in the future. How is it going to be? Or am I going to just teach, or am I just going to perform? And preferably many of them want to just to perform. And one of the things that gets kind of forgotten during that period is that there are so many other things as well. And you unfortunately just find out about them after you go into the world. And then if you're open to different opportunities and chances, you're gonna see a lot of different possibilities to not only work as a musician but also for the whole community around you. So that's been a big change for me as well.
Absolutely.
To be able to see that. So with music you have so many pathways to actually participate in the society. So yeah, that's been a really interesting thing to see. And as well about universities, I also feel like, okay, during our times there was already I recognized that need from myself, and I do remember that in Weimar they had quite good possibilities to get to know about career afterwards and what you can do to promote your music. But I think many of the universities are currently changing even more their curriculums to go into that direction, which is of course totally right thing to do. It's not just about practicing and learning about composers 300 years ago. So yeah,
super important. Yes,
yeah.
And I think the rest of the world is slowly catching up with how music works, because music is as a business, as a way of life, is of course very uncertain.
Yes.
If you don't have a job at the university, or if you are not a orchestral musician, then of course the uncertainty is very apparent.
Yeah.
And this seems to be also happening now in different fields as well, where people lose their jobs and restructuring companies happens and stuff like that. So I think we're just happy that we have the experience for a longer time than many other people,
Yeah.
with being in uncertain times and with dealing with difficulties, which don't necessarily have to do with music itself, but just with the economy and with the world as we know today. So challenges and overcoming them is something that you have to gain experience in.
Yeah,
as well.
That's a perfect way to put it. I think challenges is exactly the word. That okay, there have of course always been challenges, but I feel that now it's even more in our face. You need to be able to adapt quite well
and
nowadays.
Fast.
And fast, yes,
fast.
that's a really good way to put it. Yeah. How do you feel about currently now? If you think about, let's say, classical guitar scene and guitar scene as a whole. The direction where it's going, how do you feel about it? What do you think about it currently?
I think that important thing is to compare classical guitar to the general guitar scene, because I find very many similarities between classical guitar and say jazz guitar scene or metal scene or pop guitar scene. They're kind of fragmenting, they're kind of, I would say, they're not necessarily being open to each other.
Yeah.
Which might not look like this from the outside, because you see guitar as an instrument and everybody's happy, but in the reality what I observe is that many classical guitarists would try to stick to each other, and many jazz guitarists would try to stay just in the kind of improvised music that we call jazz, and the same goes with maybe an extreme example with metal, with gent, with other directions of music where they specialize a lot, but also at the same time many musicians just don't really like to connect with other kinds of music. And of course there are so many that do, which is great, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because if you play classical music on classical guitar, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't know what other guys are doing, and it doesn't mean you have to become a metal player.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's important to be aware of what is going on, and this is, I think, what I observe right now very, very strongly, that those differences are not necessarily getting smaller.
Okay.
And maybe the general spirit of, especially classical guitarists, because that's who we are, should be to stay open to other musical genres, not to play them, not to embrace them, but to be aware of what is going on, and maybe to push the guitar in the other way. The other problem, of course, would apply to modern classical music in general, where it's seen by many people outside of music as elitist, right? And as something that is not very approachable, that is not easy to understand. And of course we could tell many reasons why is it happening. I mean, the main reason for me is that people are just not, how harsh it sounds, but not necessarily educated, or not able to perceive the music. If you never learned how to do it, what do you do during a concert? How to enjoy it, and why to go to a concert in the first place? Well, then it's difficult to embrace the culture. But But it's very important, and especially in a society like we experience nowadays, with so much stress and with so much working hours, it becomes necessary to go back to the basics and to embrace the music and to allow ourselves to enjoy it again. Maybe not expecting at the same time the emotions that you would get from a rock concert or a football game, but to discover something beautiful for yourself that you can also find in modern classical music, so in those softer kinds of culture. Let's put it this way, maybe.
Nice way to put it. And that's one of the things that I always tend to think as well. Like, okay, if I'm gonna play a concert or guitar concert is happening somewhere, it's kind of in a competition to staying the evening at home and competing with Netflix and movies, or maybe a great rock concert. And I think it's totally wrong way to think about it as well. But this thought still appears in music quite often. And another interesting thing that you mentioned is that this isolation happening between different kinds of guitar playing. And of course I recognize it from classical guitar. Multiple reasons for that. We don't have to go into them. But yeah, I didn't know that it's also happening in jazz, and well, maybe jazz, but metal and maybe pop. It's interesting to hear. And I agree with you 100% with that I think the direction to the future is kind of coming together in a way, because in a way currently guitar is also developing into a really interesting direction, especially through fingerstyle music, and they're combining a lot of different styles and playing techniques. Guitar is having a kind of a renaissance again. Just a little bit out of playbook.
Yeah.
Did you ever struggle with your identity as a classical guitarist, classical musician, and then going more into the direction of popular music? It's something I sometimes struggle with.
No, I struggle with identity of other classical musicians mostly.
Okay.
Because I don't think I ever had this problem. Maybe because I always would identify myself as a composer, And what I say, I mean, it's difficult to talk that open about colleagues, but I mean, it has to be said. I'll just go on, which is that they seem a bit afraid of other kinds of music. They seem afraid of trying stuff themselves, and of course it's not just their fault, because this is how we are taught to be, and because of course if you play classical music you spend so much time doing it, and doing just this, because it's alone technically so demanding that you have to spend basically all your life to perfect it, and then comes the musical side, the expression, stuff like that. So it becomes very difficult to get to a certain point, and I think many musicians just maybe get a bit stuck in what they do. And it's not difficult to get unstuck, but you have to allow yourself to do it. So whereas I never myself felt any kind of struggle in that direction, in that way, I think many other people do, and I'm honestly not really sure what's the solution here, how to change the ways of thinking in the direction that I believe would be more beneficial for music at all, for the whole music, to make it just maybe more effortless, maybe more beautiful, maybe maybe push it forward faster. So it's very difficult. But I myself, I kind of never struggle, never have a problem with what I do, because I always allow myself to experiment to a very, very far extent. Maybe sometimes too far. Maybe some people would argue that it's bordering with losing time. But on the other hand, how would you know what you're doing if you don't try it first, right? Everybody's different, so that's how I see it. I know. So I wish more people would be a bit more free. Maybe not as free as I try to be, because then we would never achieve much as a collective of musicians, But in a way, I think there is room for change, for sure. To mention the topic that we already discussed, which is the versatility of a musician.
Yes.
And what we are doing as well, or what are we playing as well. So we would not just play classical concerts, right? We would play other things as well. Maybe one day you will play at a coffee place. Maybe one day we would play a wedding, right? And that's the kind of things that I believe many musicians would have an internal struggle with. Should I play this? Since you spend so much time doing something completely different, should you try it? And I think yes, because there's just good music, right? You can make it well regardless of what you're doing.
Yes.
It's just not about music. Whatever you do, if you're teaching, if you're writing, if you're booking concerts for yourself, or if you're doing your taxes, if you decide to do it in the right way, then it's going to be the best you can do. And I believe this is the most important thing. So what you're doing kind of stops being so important as long as you put yourself into it, and as long as you try to do the best you can, then you grow as a person, and the thing you do becomes better as well, regardless of what it is. So I think that many musicians might have this kind of fear and distance to certain things that we do, maybe pushed in the direction because of earning money, maybe
Yes.
Maybe because of scheduling issues and stuff like that, which you can't really avoid. Which you can't really avoid fully. So those are the things that I believe many musicians spend much too much time thinking about instead of doing them.
Yeah, that's
Anyway.
guilty of that as charged. Yeah, but I'm sure you're right about that.
We all do it. You know?
Yeah, we all do it. Yes, we do. But, it's a good thing to discuss about this so openly as well, because there shouldn't be a difference. It's also about the public to whom you are playing. Why should there be a difference if you're playing a really high-level classical concert and the people are enjoying it, and you play a wedding where you play pieces which are important for the people who are there, and if they're enjoying it, why should there be a difference between this? Maybe there shouldn't.
Maybe, well, of course, there's the human elements. Maybe we prefer something, we have preferences. Well, then sure, we have to decide and do things that, well, we prefer. Sure, we have a taste, and we have to let ourselves be guided by this taste, but not necessarily by some kind of prejudice or something that might just not be there.
What current trends or developments in music industry are you most excited about?
That's a very big question indeed.
Yes.
It's an excellent question indeed. So the developments in modern music, in modern also society probably, and also in technology, because there is a lot of going on, a lot of interesting, fascinating things that are going on. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, something that already happened, which is the way we listen to the music nowadays most often, which would not be from physical media, but it would be probably streaming. Right? Most people, when you say you're a musician, gonna ask you, can I find you on the internet? Can I stream your music? So that puts a huge challenge upon musicians, especially in classical world, in modern classical world, because the industry kind of shifts to the way the media is being produced and consumed in the way that we know it from the social media. So you have to have a constant output. In the perfect world, they would like us to write a piece of music every day and then record it and release it. Whereas sometimes it takes maybe a year to do it.
Yeah.
And then when you finally did it, then it's just going to be a little video on the internet just disappearing after a day. So this is a big problem for many artists, not just musicians. But this is something that we all struggle with, and this is it's not going away. So we have to find a way to deal with that. And I'm very excited myself to try many different approaches to that problem. I'm not really sure what it's going to be really, and it's going to take some time to find the right way, but I'm sure that the music will prevail and that we will find a way that will reach our audience in the end. Of course, the huge topic is the artificial intelligence, right? The AI that many people talk about, and also in context of music, which becomes more and more predominant in the discussions. Just yet, not necessarily in the actual music making. As I observe it, we have some tools that we can use, and it's fun. But at least for musicians doing contemporary classical music, I don't think it's going to change the scene that fast. So, but of course, with AI, we would also have to talk about the philosophical perspective, and
Yes.
Which would be much too long for this interview. I'll be very happy if we had another one just dedicated to this, because it's a huge topic. But I think that we're quite stable in what we do, and the future will bring many innovations. The future will bring many changes in how the music sounds, how the music is being consumed, listened to. But I think it is just going to make the music more interesting. So, for example, I'm not really maybe afraid of it. I don't know. I just see it as a new tool. I just see it as something that we will have to embrace and use ourselves. But I see it as a very exciting development. So those are, I think, those two biggest changes that we already see coming, and which will be discussed more and more in the coming years. What else is changing? Well, the guitar itself is changing, right? We see development in the instrument itself, but then also we see many new forms of guitars, many new things that you can do with a guitar, which I have so much fun experimenting with. I have some interesting guitars here, but also some interesting devices that can completely transform the way that the guitar works and sounds, which, for example, keyboard players know for many years.
Yes.
But were unavailable to us because of how a guitar works. It was just very difficult in a technical way to be achieved, right?
Okay.
But we're getting there, and so all the interesting sounds are becoming more and more accessible, and I believe that it also is pushing the way of playing a bit in a different direction. I remember there were many experimental compositions from students and maybe also professors from the modern composition direction, stuff like that, with electronics, with lots of new toys and solutions. But I think that there is a good possibility and a good way to make it mainstream. So to adapt all those sounds and to take it out of experimental zone and to make it accessible to musicians, because this in turn might actually make the music more accessible to music lovers. And I think that this is also going to happen. Alone, for example, if we're just talking about classical guitar, how you enjoy a classical guitar concert nowadays, it's a standard to amplify a guitar with microphone and PA. It was not like this when I was a kid. It was frowned upon, and it was not very welcome. Right now, It's changing because why would we make it difficult for people to enjoy what we love so much, right?
That makes so much sense, and I can identify so much also with that last statement. I also remember it was kind of like a question about honor of not playing with amplification, and I remember playing some concerto. I guess it was Villalobos concerto, and people were saying, my teachers included, you're not supposed to play that with amplification, you just have to play louder in order to... But it's difficult because a lot of the music is happening in the same register as what orchestra or even small one is playing. So I can totally understand what you mean by that. And also interesting to hear between the lines, you mentioned two things that can be very much interpreted as a negative thing, social media, let's say, and artificial intelligence. But Einstein, the way you think about it is very positive. At least that's the way I interpret it.
Yes.
You sound quite optimistic about it, which is nice to hear. Janko, thank you very much for this interview. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
And see you in 1 month in Chemnitz.
Looking forward so much to it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.